What's going on, people? Myke C-Town here with the third and final edition of this musical journey series that I started. Hopefully you guys have watched the other two, but it all started from a question that I got from Jack Lance, which said, how did you get into extreme music? So yes, we are finally here after talking about punk, talking about hip-hop. We're going to talk about extreme metal. So, in the early to mid 90s, I was listening mostly to hardcore. I didn't know much about metal at the time except for Metallica, who I'd heard from the nerdy metal kids in my high school, and Suicidal Tendencies, who I discovered through an ad in Thrasher magazine, I believe. But things got serious when I discovered King Diamond, which I found in a pawn shop in the really small town that I was living in called Conyers, Georgia. I got Abigail, Them, and Conspiracy. I bought them all at one time, and I bought them off the strength of the album covers. I can't put my finger on exactly what it was about King Diamond, but it just blew me away, and I just became obsessed with him, man. I bought every single King Diamond record that I could find. I bought every Merciful Fate record that I could find. And I also got Manowar's Triumph of Steel at that same pawn shop, which I loved. So that led me into getting into more heavy metal and thrash stuff, like Iron Maiden, Violence, Anthrax, Halloween, Dio. Then I got into death metal, and the interesting thing is I wasn't really into the brutal stuff at first. It took me a minute to actually get into it. I liked grindcore stuff like Ass Suck, like Brutal Truth, Excruciating Terror, Monster X, Phobia, Cripple Bastards. So it was natural for me to move into stuff like Carcass or Suffocation. You know, those were two of the really early bands that I got into. My buddy Andy in high school, he gave me Heartwork to check out when it first came out, and I hated it at first. But one day, maybe a year or so later, it clicked, and I was like, holy shit, this is great. Then I got into stuff like Cannibal Corpse, Obituary, Morbid Angel. You know, I remember going to a record store that had just bought some dude's entire cassette collection, and I remember buying like 10 JL America tapes, which is a label from back in the day. They had a lot of great bands like Asheron, Beharit, Deteriorate. Then while on a road trip to an out-of-town show, I discovered melodic death metal through At the Gates. And from there, I got into stuff like In Flames, Dismember, Dark Tranquility, Eucharist, Gates of Ishtar, fucking Edge of Sanity, Ablaze My Sorrow, all that good shit. Basically anything that was melodic and aggressive was right up my alley. And this is what I was listening to when I was in my band. You know, like we wanted to be the At the Gates or the In Flames of the hardcore scene. Of course, that didn't happen. And then shortly after that, every fucking band under the sun wanted to do the same exact thing. So we were like, peace out. Now let's talk about black metal, because I feel like that's what a lot of you guys are wondering about. So I first heard Living Colour, and that was my first taste of black metal. And then I heard Body Count, and I was totally sold. Kidding, obviously. Trust me, I understand the irony of a black guy talking about listening to black metal, especially in the mid to late 90s. But anyway, I started listening to this stuff around 1995. I would see a few kids around the hardcore scene wearing shirts with this crazy art on them. And in talking to them about death metal, I discovered that these bands were called black metal bands, which was really interesting to me. I didn't know anything about this stuff. And I remember there was this band called Thenceforward, a local Atlanta hardcore band. They released a 7-inch in 1995. That on the center labels had a picture of, I believe, Euronymous and Dead. And I was just so intrigued by it. So I ran out to Tower Records and I bought my first black metal CD, which was Dark Throne's Transylvanian Hunger. And I was addicted. It was like nothing that I'd heard before. The raw but mysterious sound that it had, it was fast, it sounded nasty, but the sound wasn't super far from some of like the crustier punk stuff that I was listening to. Like, you know, I was really into the DIY punk scene, so most of the bands that I was really listening to, they had no label, they had no budget, so their recordings sounded like shit. So Transylvanian Hunger fit right in there perfectly. Now this was before the internet was huge, so none of us really knew much about this stuff. And in my young, naive head, I thought that these could just be these twisted punk bands that were trying to start up a new genre. I didn't learn about the whole culture aspect of it until a bit later, but From the Dark Throne CD, my obsession with black metal took off. I bought everything that I could find by them. This is also around when I first heard Cradle of Filth. They had a song, To Eve the Art of Witchcraft, which was on a comp, and I don't remember what comp it was, but I heard it and I was in love, and I bought everything by them too. But one of the most important CDs that I got back then was the Blackened comp. And this is where I got my first taste of Emperor, Mayhem, Enslaved, Gorgoroth, Moonspell. So I just grabbed all of that stuff that I could find, all of the albums by all of these bands, dude. I remember getting Moonspell's Wolfheart and falling in love instantly. It was angry, but it still had melody, and the goth vocals just spoke to me. And another big takeaway from there was Emperor. Like Dark Throne, Emperor's raw and scary and mysterious sound, it just sucked me in way more than any other band at the time, and they quickly became my favorite band. Again, this was before the internet, so finding bands was a matter of going to record stores and buying stuff that had any kind of weird writing that was barely legible. So I spent every single weekend at Tower Records back then, and I would just buy any CD that had ridiculous scribble writing on it or pentagrams in the artwork. And I also bought zines, and then I found pen pals. So I was doing a whole lot of tape trading. I would trade American hardcore demos with people in like Scandinavia and Japan, and they would send me these crazy black metal tapes. And that's how I found a lot of the more obscure black metal stuff. You know, that's how I found bands like Forgotten Woods or Fimble or Vornat or Zemiel or even Judas Iscariot. This was also before I knew about the weird racist underbelly of black metal. That kind of thing wasn't widely known to a lot of us in the 90s. Like, I could imagine that a lot of the dudes who were trading tapes with me back then would have had a coronary if they knew that they were sending fucking Breezin tapes to some black dude in size 56 cross-color jeans. A lot of us didn't know how racist some of these folks were until we actually started to go see some of these bands live. I remember being at a local death metal show with some friends who were invited by the band that was playing, and I remember meeting these guys and one of the guys making a joke. He said some shit like, "Hi, I'm the evil white man that's been oppressing you for years." Some stupid shit like that, and I was just like, alright. I remember we ended up saying fuck these guys and leaving, and then we heard that after them, the headliner, who I can't remember who they were, but they said something along the lines of, if you see a nigger in the audience, fuck them up. And they apparently attacked some dude. And I've made videos of other instances like this, so I won't get deep into that, but that shit was there, man. And in those days, it was actually rampant. And it's just that in terms of black metal, I didn't know that there was this whole faction of these racist black metal bands until I started seeing shit on message boards, and then a few of the tapes that I was sent had swastikas drawn on them. I remember one time I traded a tape with this guy, and it was taking forever for me to get his tape, so I emailed him and, you know, said, hey, what's going on? He wrote back and was like, well, you know, the post office has gone dark. So I asked my roommate if he thought it meant what I thought it meant, and he was like, yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what the fuck he means. So I emailed him and asked him, and sure enough, that's exactly what he meant. Apparently, there were too many black people working at the post office, and that was fucking things up. Who knew? But that didn't make me stop enjoying the music. I just recognized that it was a culture that I had no control over. You know, I couldn't change everything. And just like the tough guy element of the hardcore scene that I really hated didn't make me stop listening to hardcore bands. You know, the culture was just shifting. But pretty soon, that was primarily what I was buying, fucking hardcore records and black metal records. You know, it's super weird. So I'm listening to Gorilla Biscuits one second and Mayhem the next. But it was such a fun time in my life, man. Finding a whole new genre of music and diving into it. It's not like today, finding groups within genres that I'm already into or genres that I might be familiar with. That's exciting and all, but it doesn't compare to finding a whole new genre, right? And then realizing there's a whole world of bands out there that I'd never heard of. And the times were just so different back then, you know? I actually kind of miss them. You know, you didn't have every stupid music media outlet talking about metal. Not death metal, and surely not black metal. And everything still had that seedy and gross feeling, like you felt like you were buying something that you really weren't supposed to be listening to. Everything felt mysterious and dangerous and exciting, man. Like, this was a time where you actually had to put in work to find bands. This was before every asshole on the block with a stupid haircut had a black metal band. You know, this was before every asshole in some stupid shitty pop band knew who Burzum was, right? This was a time where if you were walking down the street and you saw somebody in an Emperor or like a Dissection shirt, you'd stop them and you'd talk to them about metal, and a lot of times you just became friends just off of that. Now any asshole can walk into fucking Hot Topic and pick up a Mayhem shirt, and a lot of times have no idea who the hell they even are. And this is before every asshole on earth who'd been listening to black metal for a year had some worthless opinion on how the fucking scene should be. You know, it just was what it was, man. It was dark, it was evil, it was scary, and it was dangerous. And when the punk scene started to lose that feeling of being dangerous and antagonistic, the black metal scene just kind of filled that void for me, for better or for worse. So that's really it, in a nutshell. That's how I got into extreme metal. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this series. Jack Lance, thank you for sending that question in. It was actually a lot of fun for me to take a trip down memory road. And yeah, make sure you leave some comments down there about how you got into extreme metal. And as usual, thank you for living, thank you for loving, thank you for being you. And I'll see you guys next time. All right, peace out, boy.